Okay, let's talk a little bit about FTP for Linux. First off, what we need to do is to take a look and make sure we got a good IP address. And that's winding up being what you have to do first with these. Ping 192.168.254.1. Now what's that? That's my default gateway. If you don't know what your default gateway is, you can do a route -n, and you'll notice the one with a G for gateway will tell you what your default gateway is. So if I can ping my default gateway, I'm in good shape. The VMs are bad to assign you an IP address. I'm 170. They're bad to assign you an IP address, and then when you try to use it, it actually doesn't really work. So sometimes you have to do a service network restart a few times. The next thing we need to do is to see if SE Linux is enforcing. How do we do that? Get enforce. And it is enforcing, so how am I going to fix it? Set enforce 0. Or the problem with that is it's not going to keep the next time you reboot. There's probably some great text way to do it, but I'm going to cheat and say system config security level, and for once I'm going to use the cute thing and make it permissive or just disable it altogether. Okay, so now if I do a get enforce, it's permissive. Okay, so that takes care of SE Linux. What about the firewall for the machine? How about it? How do we know what's going on? iptables-L. Yes, I've got a good sized firewall going on. So I'm going to do an iptables-F to flush them. Then I'm going to do another -L to say, yep, they're nice and clean now. So how do you save that? Because if I reboot the machine, the filter's coming back. The firewall's coming back. So how do I save that? Well, for the classroom, and if you're doing this in the real world, you probably would make your IP tables something decent. But just for the classroom, just to teach FTP, I'm going to do a service IP table save, and it's going to write that. So now SE Linux is turned off, and the IP tables are turned off. All right, so we've got everything saved, and we're ready to get rolling. Let's check and see if we have an FTP server running right now. We're going to use netstat. What does netstat do? Tells you about what open ports you have, and Windows has its counterpart too, does the same thing. We're going to use netstat nap. There are a lot of different switches to netstat, and you wind up just hanging with little combinations that you like. I'm going to grep for FTP. Okay, FTP, there's nothing there for FTP. We'll take a look at all of them. You see what ports I've got open. 25, I've got mail open. I don't have the FTP ports, which are what? 20 and 21. I can also do an RPM-QA. This is the Redhat package manager, is RPMs. That's how you install stuff. The -QA says query all, and if you run it just by itself, it's going to list all of the packages that are installed on that machine. There's a lot of them, so I'm going to stop it. So if I do an RPM-QA and grep for FTP, I'm going to take just a second, and I've got FTP, but that's the client side of it. I want the server side of it. So what I'm going to install, I'm going to use Yum. Yum is the Yellow Dog update manager. Yellow Dog was another version of Linux, and apparently they like the package management of it, so Yum got used a lot. So Yum install Vsftpd. Let's take a look at that. VS is very secure. FTP is FTP, and then D is a daemon. A daemon is a process that's going to load up into memory, you know, open a port in this case, and it's just going to stay up in memory and be a service. So I'm going to do a yum install vsftpd. You can also do a -y when you get more used to it. I'm going to leave it off right now so we see what's going to happen. And what this is going to do, it actually is pretty handy, especially if you've ever used Linux and had to do a song and dance where you've had to find the libraries that go with some program. It's such a hassle. So what this is going to do is going to go out to the CentOS repositories, pull what it needs, pull all of its dependencies along with it, and it turns out this is pretty simple stuff. It's just going to get one package that's 137K, and I'm going to say yeah, and it's going to fetch it, install it, and even give me a lovely little service Vsftpd status. Even can use my very Redhatty service command on that. So Vsftpd is stopped. To start it, service Vsftpd start. Run my status command again, and it's running. We can also do our netstat command again. I'm going to cheat and just reach for it. Wasn't the one I wanted. I'm going to grep for FTP. And somebody just changed my wallpaper for me. Thank you very much. I'm going to do that service IP tables panic here in a second. Okay, service or netstat nap grep for FTP. I can see now Vsftpd is running on port 21. Now why isn't port 20 open? It's actually the way FTP works. It sets up your connection, kind of your text part of it is done over 21. It says, hello, authentication, I would like this file. When it actually sends files, it opens up port 20. Okay, so we've got FTP. If I rebooted the machine, would FTP be running? Don't think so. What command do we use to set up the scripts for start time? chk config. And if I do a -- list, it's going to tell me all my different processes and what run level they're going to be running at. Okay, so Vsftpd, it's actually, I can see it from here, it's off. So I'm going to do a chk config Vsftpd on. And when I do my list again, I will actually grep for FTP. And I can see that it's turned on now on run levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. So FTP's working. Now to make this a little bit easier to see, I'm going to jump in real quick and set up user access on Apache. So let's do this real quick. I'm going to say cd etc httpd conf, and there's my Apache configuration stuff. I'm going to do a copy httpd.conf, httpd.conf. I'm going to save my configuration file just in case I botch it, which is always a possibility. Vim httpd.conf. Now if you're in the web server class, you've already done a lab on this, so I'm not going to take too long with this. I'm going to go find my user section. There we go. User dir disable. I'm going to put in a # to enable user directories, and I'm going to pull that one out. User dir public HTML. That means every user is going to have a, whichever ones want web access, is going to have a public HTML directory. And this is the control stanza for that. So I'm going to pull out the # off of it. And again, there's another lab that does all this. So that gets us set up for user access. HTTPD is not running. So how do we set it up? Service HTTPD start. chk config httpd on. So that's going to start it for right now. It's going to start it whenever the machine boots. There's your two commands. Okay, I'm going to create some users because I'm going to need them for FTP, and I want to actually use them. So if I know that they need a public HTML directory and they need some kind of index.html, before I create them, nobody really there now, I'm going to say cd etc scale, and in etc scale I'm going to make a directory public HTML, and I'm going to go into there, vim index.html, just to have a dummy index.html file so that the users will have something to start with. HTML, some of my lovely HTML code, default user web page. And probably the ugliest use of HTML you've ever seen, but it'll work. Right, quit. So now, when I create new users, user add Wilbur. I'm going to go ahead and give Wilbur a password because I'm going to need that for FTP. Set his password just a password. User add Orville. Okay, so now I've created Wilbur and Orville. They should both have a public HTML. They both should have a dummy index.html. There's Wilbur and Orville. CD Wilbur. There's his public HTML. And there's his index.html. So they've got something in there. One more thing that if you're in the web class, you've seen this before. We know that when you hit these sites, that the Apache is not going to have rights to look into these. So I'm going to say chmod 711 on Orville and on Wilbur. So now this will allow Apache to descend into this directory and see the web stuff. Alright, going to bounce back out right now, and I was 254.170. 192, 168, 254.170. That makes sense because I never changed my default web page. That's the one that sits there at var www.html. That's just your default beats nothing web page that CentOS set up there. But if I use tilde Wilbur, I get his default page, and Orville, the pages look just alike. Okay, so I've got this so that I can see what's going on. Now then, I'm going to go ahead. I've already got FTP running. I turned it on. I started the service. Even used netstat to see that port 20 was open. So I'm going to just open my computer, and I'm going to say FTP. Wait a second. Hang on. All right, let's see. Did I already have one open? FTP ://Wilbur at 192.168.254.170. So this is hitting my FTP server. There's Wilbur, password. There we go. So I can see Wilbur's public HTML directory. And now I'm going to download his index.html, open it with Notepad, and it's got me some control characters in there. This default user web page. Let's throw in a break and say my name is, who's I logged in as? Wilbur. My name is Wilbur. Save it, and FTP should allow me to send it right back up again. It does, and now we back up to Wilbur, refresh, and there we go. So that proves FTP is working. Alrighty. Now then, how do we control who can log in and who can't? Let's go back again to our FTP. FTP colon slash 192 dot shoot. It's timing out. 192, thank you. 192.168.254.170. If I do that, look, I've got anonymous access. Not so pretty good. So what we need to do is we need to turn off anonymous access. Alrighty. So where do you think our control file for Vsftpd is going to be? Most likely in Etsy. And most likely there's a directory under there, Vsftpd. So there we go. We've got a couple of configuration files here. The most obvious one, of course, is going to be vsftpd.conf. So let's do a vim vsftpd.conf. Better yet, how about this? Copy vsftpd.conf vsftpd.conf.org, just in case I trash it. Vim vsftpd.conf. Anonymous enable equals yes. Now, you might think you just pound that out. But if you look, and a lot of these configuration files, if you just stop and read them, you'll see, beware, allowed by default if you comment this out. So what we want to actually do is put in no. Right, quit, service, vsftpd, restart, because we actually modified the configuration file. And let's hop back out again. (192.168.254.170). It's going to try to log in anonymously, and we've turned it off. So it'll time out and say no. We'll have to give it a user. Okay. Vsftpd is one of the most counterintuitive programs I've ever seen. And this is the reason. You've got FTP users and you've got user list. Both of these look like dandy-fine candidates to say, okay, who do I want to have FTP access? They both look like they'd be good for that. Both of these files are lists of people who do not have FTP access, believe it or not. Let's take a look at, let's do the first one. More FTP users. Users that are not allowed to log in via FTP. Now, we were talking about security. You don't want root logging in doing FTP. You'd want to log in as somebody else and then move the files around as root. The rest of these are system processes that would never need to log in any capacity, much less FTP. Let's look at more user list. Now, user list is flexible. What it is, if user list equals deny equals no, then allow users in this file. If it's yes, then never allow users in this file. Don't even prompt for a password. So it does the same as the other file. It just, sometimes you get a different message. So, and we can talk some about security. You've got two different angles you can hit it from. You can hit it from the open side, where you say, we're going to leave everything open, and as we have troubles, we're going to just block off stuff. If we have trouble with people playing games, we'll block the port. If we have trouble with mail, we might block port 25. So that would be the open way. The closed way would be, okay, we're going to use a firewall, we're going to close everything up, and if you can prove you have a need to have a port opened, then we'll do it the more secure way. So this file can be used one way or the other. So by default, to CentOS's credit, it's set up from the secure side. So what I want to do, we need to look at this directive right here. User list underscore deny equals no. Now the problem is this is in the configuration file, but this directive isn't in there to begin with. So I'm going to do a vim of vsftpd.conf, and I'm going to add user list underscore deny equals no. I'm just going to tack it to the end. User list underscore deny equals no. Right quit, service vsftpd, restart to see if I made any syntax errors, and it went down and back up again, so I should be okay. The problem is now my user list, I'm letting the wrong people in. So I'm going to say copy userlist, userlist.org, and vim userlist. And I'm just going to go zipping through here and delete everybody. Then I'm going to add Wilbur. We're going to say that Orville is the black sheep of the family, and we're not going to let him in. We're just going to let in Wilbur. All right. I don't think the user list requires a restart. So now we're back to here. Log in as Wilbur. Password. Wilbur gets in. Log in as Orville. Orville gets kicked out. So right now the only person that has FTP access on this system is Wilbur. That's the long and short of FTP. Any questions?